And what was the mood like on campus when that switched? Did a reality sort of set in for a certain amount of students? Are people still, I mean, I know people still, young people our age are still, not everybody's on board with the fact that this is very serious and will be affecting us for a couple of months. Some people just want to treat it like, it's going to be a week and then it'll blow over. But yeah, so
Totally.
what was that like with students on campus? I mean,
Yeah, I think the reality set in at different points for different people. For me, it became a lot more real on Monday because I found out that the trip that I've been planning for this week, an alternative spring break trip to Alabama, was going to be canceled. And once that happened, I think that was the beginning for me of a series of events of things getting more and more serious. It went from that's getting canceled to, okay, all classes are going to be online and we're reassessing on April 3rd, to if you're on campus, you're getting kicked out, but me thinking, oh, I'm in an apartment, I'll be fine, to no, you're also getting kicked out. You have to leave campus, everyone pack up your stuff and go. So it happened very, very quickly. And there were still people, my friends, who were planning on going to Costa Rica or Florida for spring break, even after they knew that they were getting kicked out of their apartments. So there were the people who for weeks had been saying, this is coming, impending doom, to those who are still right now out celebrating St. Patty's Day, probably pretending that nothing else is happening. And I went to Drexel University on Thursday because my cousin goes there, and they were a couple days behind. So Thursday was the day that all the announcements happened. So students really had no time to internalize and spent the entire weekend partying, which feels surreal when everyone else is in apocalypse mode.
Right. Wow. That's wild. Yeah, I mean, it just shows you, right? Everybody's getting things at different times. All these announcements are coming out at different times. There's no unilateral, this is when everybody found out. I know that is one of the scariest aspects of it, is that it doesn't seem like there's any continuity across any of these government agencies. Everything sort of catch can a little bit. So, for Americans, coronavirus has really only begun to become a serious issue in this past, week or so, as our lives have been disrupted. Because generally, as Americans, we think of ourselves in a bubble. So I'm wondering, what was it like as an American in Vietnam to hear so little about it from the American media as your life in Vietnam started to change?
Well, I there was a period of time for a few weeks, right, where every other story you were hearing about it said the opposite thing, right? One story would say that, oh, it's not that bad, we're going to be fine, whatever. The next story would say, oh, we're all dying, So there was a lot of sort of uncertainty about how bad it was actually going to be, and how seriously you had to take it. And of course, everyone was taking it. At least everyone in my life here was taking it with some degree of seriousness, but I don't know if anybody was really, really understood the gravity of the situation until pretty recently, and so I don't know that. I'm not sure that there was anything that at least for me, that felt different being specifically American, right? But I think, you can kind of just look at it on a grand scale. I don't think anybody was really sure what was going on. And so what was interesting, though, was not so much seeing the media, but just the differing responses by the governments, right? Whereas I'm here, and again, all of my information is secondhand here, but I'm here and I can see how effective they've been, right? And how much they've done to, at this point, try and slow the spread of it.
Right.
And, this could change, but so far they've done a really good job. And, you compare that with what's going on in America, and I speak to my mother with some regularity, and I speak to friends and stuff. It boggles the mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I keep saying, and maybe this is a little bit messed up to say, but I'm surprised by it. I really I feel more comfortable here
Right.
I honestly feel more comfortable writing this out here than I do going back home right now.
And so what's it like going through this for you so far from home and family and New Jersey, you know, everything you've known from a young age?
Personally, I chose to move away from my family, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to see them for long periods of time.
Right.
And it's not as challenging as you would expect. Because of the break that I was granted, I actually have more time to speak to my family on the phone.
Right.
Everyone's working from home. All of my friends that graduated college are now working from home. So I can pretty much call or talk to anybody I want whenever I want for as long as I want, and it's not really a concern. So it's been actually beneficial for my relationships with my family.
Interesting.
But it's not what you'd expect. But it's in many ways, it's also like challenging for people that I know that have family in America and were planning to go, because it's like they want to go to America, but on the one hand, America's in a much worse situation than Israel.
Absolutely.
As I previously described.
Yes.
And yeah, it's like, it's hard not being with my family, but like I knew I wasn't going to be with them. It was kind of sad losing a day to spend with my mom.
Right.
But outside of that, I think that I've spoken to my grandparents more this week than I have since I've drafted, because I literally went for an adventure out into the fields outside my kibbutz for 3.5 hours today, and walked all over the place, and I just have a lot of free time. And
right. Are a lot of people wearing masks? Like when you go out, were you wearing a mask? Were other people wearing masks?
So this is a great question. So as a lone soldier with not really family in Israel, when you do have money to spend, you're not going to spend it on a mask, because like the worst thing that happens is like you get sick, you're trapped in your room, the army pays you for 2 weeks. So like, and you'd rather spend your money on food and alcohol. So I'm not wearing a mask, but my host family on the kibbutz, after going on public transportation, has ostracized me. And the soldiers that are on the kibbutz are pretty much in like self-quarantine from the rest of the community, and we're not allowed to engage with them.
The army isn't issuing masks though? There's no masks for soldiers, nothing like that?
There's not enough.
Okay. So when spring break ends, you know, which do you think is going to be more difficult? The fact that your learning is now online, or the fact that you have to teach online? And I'm not sure if they're making you prepare those lessons, or they're making the other teachers prepare those lessons, or what, but.
Right. Probably should answer your question.
You see what
you're nice. Good redirect. So I would say that I can't imagine I'm going to be doing much teaching this, in the coming months, just because hypothetically, I guess a teacher, I don't know how that's going to be worked. If a teacher could take a sick day from a virtual classroom, I'm maybe Schaefer would have some more insight into that, but I don't anticipate filling in for too many teachers. I would say that I'm going to be more on the student side, which is okay. It is what it is, but definitely a lot of Zoom. It's going to be a lot more discussion boards instead of in-person discussions, which I personally do not favor. And I think Schaefer was touching upon this earlier, how going to school, obviously content can be important if it's taught the right way, but at the social skills and teamwork and there's so many other variables that go into a student's learning,
right?
And just speaking through a computer is not going to help facilitate those skills.
Right.
So that's something that I'm kind of interested to see how that develops.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so much of being in school is about being with other people in the classroom. It's like, we as humans, we learn by the people around us. If everyone else is focusing, it's easier for us to focus, right? There's always the reason people go to the library, right? It's like, oh, it's easier for me to pay attention when I see other people doing work. And there's obviously layers to that, especially in the classroom.
Right. And I think that also the way we're having a discussion right now is pretty good. But I think if the three of us were in person, I imagine it would be flowing a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the nature of human interaction. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
especially think about the classroom. If you know, I would come from it from the social studies perspective. If I present the Bill of Rights and we try to analyze them and discuss the differences between various rights in the First Amendment, a student could prepare an answer and write it out, and another student could respond to that prepared answer. But I don't feel that we're going to be doing as much learning as we would be if we were in person.
Yeah. I mean, it's to the detriment of learning. It seems like, based on what I'm hearing from both of you, I'm hoping there's some upside. Can either of you speak to that, or Shave, tell me what it was like when, this started coming down, in New York, like, what was your response to that? What were the students saying as the virus was approaching as like a storm?
Sure. I mean, obviously leading up to this time, it's been on our minds. For a while, the popular meme culture was talking about everyone going to World War III. So that's what the students were obsessed about.
Right.
And then it transitioned to coronavirus. And I do believe that, this definitely caught me off guard. I think most Americans, we were aware of the situation. We heard about it. Every fifth news story would mention the cases in other countries, but I don't think it really felt real until, the numbers started piling up here.
Right.
Something I really want to stress is the amount of chaos, frankly, in New York City, in the Department of Education. Leading up, I remember last week, it didn't really feel, throughout the week, something that we were tracking, but it almost felt like, okay, this is happening, but let's get back to our lives. And as other places started closing every day, I can only speak obviously to New York City, but every day, Blasio would come on and say, we are not closing schools. We are not closing schools. We are not closing hospitals, subways, and schools. He kept saying that as the three things we will not close. So we were kind of operating on the assumption that we're not closing no matter what.
Right.
I remember Friday was our worst attended day. We had about 50 or 60% attendance.
Wow.
My first period class had 4 kids, and we learned with 4 kids, normally a class of 30. But, we traveled along, and then, we were never told that was our last day.
The worst case scenario that everyone fears and has seen in Contagion is technically possible. But I'd say it's fairly unlikely, just based on the fact that we have, so many people who are trying to do the right thing. And it will be more likely if more people, believe in doing the right thing and trying to be optimistic. Right. If people believe that the world is ending and just kind of like accept that reality, I think it'll be more likely for that to be true.
Right.
And again, not to you shouldn't feel bad if you have, let's say, this kind of like doom and gloom feeling. It's normal. I was watching a video from a psychologist the other day, and she was suggesting to, as one of the many things that you could do to kind of like deal with like coronavirus anxiety, is to basically like schedule in like 15 minutes of worry time, where it's like, all right, like I'm gonna like write everything down that I'm like bugging out about today, and like that's okay, like, because it's a stressful time. Like, totally. It would be unreasonable to say that you aren't stressed or like aren't like thinking about this in a thinking about your loved ones, thinking about your own well-being, your career, anything. Just being sad about like admittedly, let's say, small things like missing a show or not being able to go out with your friends. Like these are like extremely important in maintaining overall well-being.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to be upset about them.
Completely.
But overall, I still think you similarly need to prioritize and focus on things that you are able to do, and that you're able to feel gratitude for.
Definitely. Right.
Because we already have been hearing, I think, a lot about like the mental health crises in America, and this can be a really trying time, and if we don't prioritize our own well-being and our own mental health in this really trying time, it's only going to just be worse for us. So
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, what you're saying, all these concerns that people have, that might seem trivial are real, missing a show, not being able to hang with friends. That's all very real. And outlets like writing and, writing about what you're stressed about is great. And I think it's great also
making videos.
Too. Yeah, making videos. Exactly. It's a great way to cope. And it's also, I think it's a great thing to do regardless of the pandemic. My hope is that some of these strategies that people are utilizing and harnessing and practicing can also be practiced once this is done, right? Let's have some lasting good from all this bad.
100%.
I'm wondering now, what's your religious view of this plague, religious, theological, other as well? Do you see any connection with some of the texts you've read, or is it more just you think of it in modern terms?
Well, something it's interesting to see how it's interesting to look at this like linguistically, and how there's always little linguistic or philological word plays in the world of, right? Sometimes it's in the world of memes, but also it's in the world of esoteric wisdom and knowledge, and how like modern events kind of reflect themselves in surprising, maybe somewhat entertaining ways in this time. So one that's really spoken to me, and I think a lot of people, because it's kind of spread around at this point. Oh yeah. Is that the word for quarantine in Hebrew is bidud, from the root bet daled daled, which means alone. And there's a form of meditative practice in one stream of Hasidism, of Jewish esoteric communities, in Kabbalistic thought, called hitbodedut, from the same root, and it means to be alone with oneself, or to alone oneself. And it's this form of meditative practice where that Rabbi Nachman of Breslov promoted in his writings 200 years ago about, which basically they tell you to go wherever, ideally somewhere far away from the distractions of people. And in this case, that's quarantine. In other cases, it might be away from the home in a forest, right? And start letting the words just come out. Speak words to God. Maybe if there's no words, sit in silence, and open yourself to the kind of freedom of not being distracted by your habits and your routines, being sort of removing yourself and existing within the privation of habit and routine, in order to actually open yourself to things things deeper inside that might have been locked up in all sorts of drawers and compartments within your heart. And so in a sense, right now, the whole world is removed itself from its habits and routines, and is getting used to habituating itself to that which is incredibly freaking weird. And by doing that, it's opening up ourselves to be able to speak what is deeper within. So literally the word quarantine and the word for this very particular meditative practice in the Hasidic tradition from 200 years ago is the same word, almost.
And you've seen memes talking about that distinct. No, so you should make a meme like that. Make it accessible.
No, I'm sure there are memes like that, but different teachers all over Israel and the world have been sharing sharing thoughts on that.
So cool. That's really cool. as you said, you're a newlywed. You are glad you didn't put it off. What is this like, going through quarantine with your wife, who popped into frame 15 minutes ago?
For sure. So, like I said, I'm very happy that we got married when we did. I really don't know how we would have handled, being quarantined with our respective families, a state away, dealing with that. It's been a surreal kind of experience with this. She's working from home now. I'm in school from home now. We don't have a very big apartment. But at the same time, we've been able to spend more time with each other. We've been able to really kind of grow together through this situation and been here to support each other. And we're still making sure that we're calling our families every day, that we're able to be in touch with our relatives, especially our older relatives. And we're really making the best of the situation. It's very easy to kind of feel isolated and feel like we're stepping on each other's feet at times. But I think that we're able to really look past that and say, if we're going to be in the situation where we can't leave, at least we can't leave with each other.
Right.
And that's been helping us get through it incredibly powerfully.
Yeah. What's it like trying to find space in a small New York City apartment for just for a little alone time? Because of course you want to spend time with your wife, and no harm there. But yeah, is it? Have you been able to get outside a little bit at all? Do you have a mask? Are you staying safe? What's it like in that regard?
Right. So we were able to get outside. Personally, this past week we haven't been, just because I had a small cough last week, and while we're not worried about it, it would be irresponsible to go out with any symptom whatsoever at a time like this.
Right.
So we've kind of been self-quarantining ourselves for now.
Okay.
Though it used to, before then, we were able to go out for groceries separately from each other, so that we were able to kind of do that. We've been alternating who works in the bedroom, who works in the dining room, to be able to keep that kind of have different views.
Sure.
And we have our work time versus our together time, and being able to keep those schedules has, I think, been very helpful. At the same time, it's been nice to be able to say, I'm a little overwhelmed, so I'm gonna come in here and just like read a book while you're working. It's been very, very helpful for us that way.
Yeah.
We haven't, thankfully, the only fever any of us have is a little bit of cabin fever, but we're able to work through that together, and that's, I think, what's really important.
Yeah, I think cabin fever is getting to all of us. So now is a great time to sort of figure out, how do you parlay your comedic chops into some of these industries that will withstand this, or at least you would have been able to withstand it had you been in them and had some jobs.
Podcasting is thriving right now. What I mean? Podcasts are really, people are gaining huge momentum because there's nothing to do. You know what I mean? So you just seek out the most amount of podcasts you can just to get through the day. So there's a lot of people probably going viral and doing very well.
Yeah.
On being comedic people that are not stand-up acts,
Right. Do you think, comedy, could you just record yourself sort of talking with the assumption that there's an audience there, or maybe even set up a couple computers and have sort of video screens coming in so you can see people's faces and hear a little feedback? Would that work to some degree, do you think? Have you thought about that? Or is it terrible?
No, a lot of people are doing that, but to me that's not so much getting better at stand-up as much as it is I just need to get on stage. I feel like an itch. That's more like scratching your own back than actually like dealing with the rash. So the rash is, you want to get better, you want your act to improve. Like, chances are all the jokes you write in isolation and the jokes you do in front of Zoom mics or whatever, that's really hot in New York City right now, they're probably not, even if they're funny jokes, probably not functional in an actual stand-up room in the same way. Even if they're fine, they're probably just not good enough to make it into your act, because they're just it's not stand-up in the same way, because joke telling works on proximity. So if you've ever observed like a comedy room, chances are the people who are laughing the most are seated closer to the front.
I've essentially sort of rotated between preschool work and the serving industry for the past few years. And I keep coming back to it just because I love the work. And the human connection, and I worry about sort of the psychosocial development of those students without contact with their peers. I think 2 to 3 is a really crucial age to have sort of in terms of personal maturation and development.
Yes. Yeah.
So, even if just less seeing my face, but, singing a song they know gets them a little bit in a routine. I hope I can help. Yeah. And as I mentioned, sort of feelings of being overwhelmed by helplessness is something that I've been trying to tackle in small ways. And I think doing this is just something that helps at least alleviate that emotion.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Of course, that's the goal. I want to connect people, foster that togetherness, foster that empathy, and
as you're doing with this show.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. It's not something I'm being compensated for either, but it's just something I enjoy. And you mentioned oscillating between back and forth with the service industry a bit too. How have your colleagues from that dealt with this? I know, of course, they've been hit incredibly hard, but just like we talked about before, some of the responses by institutions have been different than others. Have any of these restaurants, bars, etc., places done anything for these workers that you've known?
I know there have sort of restaurants in Philadelphia have had very, very varied responses. In response to public pressure, the restaurant industry that owns Zahav, and I forget the other one. I think Federal Donuts is now giving its employees paid time off. Goose Island, for which a friend of mine works, which is a sort of a chain. It's based out of Chicago, so it's definitely a bigger corporation than just one local branch.
Right.
Is providing paid time off, at least for right now. Again, there's sort of that overarching question: how long anyone can sustain themselves and their employees right now.
So yeah, you spoke about sort of your history. You haven't had to write about recession. What's it like? You were riding the bull for so long. Now we're getting torn apart by the bear. How has that transition been? Of course, now there's more pressure, as you were saying, to really deliver the goods. There's more eyeballs. Was it harder back then when everything was sort of good, or was it easier back then and harder now? Is it the pressure that makes it harder, or is it the fact that it's so important what you're doing now? Not that what you were doing before wasn't important.
Yeah, no, but I read what we wrote about, a year and a half ago, and I just am sort of thinking to myself, this stuff is way more interesting and important than that. It's honestly, it's like a matter of life and death, but in terms of like the economic crisis aspect, it's really it's all about balancing and filling out the audience, because we're known to be funny and lighthearted. And at this point, 3 million people filed for unemployment last week, and it's going to be millions more this week. So probably a lot of people who are reading the newsletter, saw their jobs evaporate in the past 2 weeks. So it's a matter, and then you have maybe 80% of the other readership who this is not really affecting, besides that they're bored out of their minds at home.
Right.
So it's a matter of feeling out the tone and figuring out, and you can carve out different spaces in the news to be lighthearted and not and serious. So
right
at the top, you can be lighthearted, and then when you're actually reporting on something serious, be somber. And then when you flip the story, you can be a little more lighthearted again. But it's just a matter of like feeling it out and making sure that you're really on top of the mood of the country. So tomorrow we're probably not going to crack a joke at the top, because just this weekend sort of, I think the cases really increased. The U.S. is in the lead by a lot right now. Things are pretty bleak, so I'm not going to come up with like a one-liner joke at the top tomorrow.
Yeah, probably a good idea.